This is your World War III update. Okay, so I have a theory about what's going on. This is just a theory. This is not a trench that I'm going to die in, but it's a theory. Okay, you're not going to hear this anywhere else. The fog of war is so thick out there, it's the blind leading the blind in the alternative media space. And I think I'm going to be able to shed some light on what's happening today. All right, now, before I do the deep dive, we have to put the kids to bed. And I don't want to be invoking John McAfee in this video. So I'm going to just get it out of the way first. I got to say, if you are one of these mouth-breathing, bottom-feeding intellectual NPCs who are just butthurt, frothing at the mouth, waiting for Nate to say the wrong political thing that triggers you so you can go down there and write your nasty comment, I just encourage you to leave right now because we're going to be getting incredibly skeptical, all right? We're cynics and we're skeptics. The best kind of skeptics is a cynic because he's always going to tell you the truth. Yes, he's a black pill doomer, and I'm perfectly fine with that. But, again, we're here to think about what's happening. We're not here to take sides. So if you're just waiting for me to slip up and say something about the guy that you worship, whoever it might be, who probably has way more money than you and wouldn't let you get within 50 feet of him because his security would shoot you, but yet you worship the ground he walks on, then, my friends, this is not the channel for you, because here we try to figure out the truth of the matter. Now that all the kiddies are gone to bed, let's quickly rattle off the deets of the day. Keir Starmer is getting ready to send 30,000 European troops to Ukraine, as well as imposing a no-fly zone. Moscow is on fire. A defense facility, a science and research facility that is associated with Russia's defense industry, is on fire in Moscow. And indeed, you guessed it, sabotage is suspected. We have a noticeably tense Vladimir Putin giving an interview today. Well, why would Vladimir Putin be tense when he's currently in the thick of a brand new bromance with Donald Trump? At least that's what we're told, right? I mean, that's why Donald Trump today is talking again about annexing Greenland for national security's sake. Well, security from what? We're friends with the Russians now, right? We're going to talk about some stuff, my friends. Minuteman missile silos are unloading today, doing another Minuteman missile test. Don't worry, this one was scheduled. This was a regularly scheduled Minuteman missile silo test, but in the context of what's going on in the world, it's still a little bit sketchy. We have Russian foreign intelligence claiming that Ukraine may arrange terrorist attacks in Europe to disrupt negotiations. I personally think that we're going to see an assassination. Why do I believe that? I think that has the best return on the investment in terms of galvanizing the people to some sort of nefarious ends. I believe that if you could do anything in Ukraine right now, you could bomb, I don't know, maybe not bombing hospitals. That would probably do it. I mean, if you do it in Gaza, nobody cares. But if you do it in Ukraine, and of course I'm being facetious, if you do it in Ukraine, then maybe somebody would bat an eye. But that's a little bit too extreme of a false flag. You know, they just bombed Chernobyl. They put a hole in it, and nobody cared. It didn't even make the end page of CNN, okay? So they got to do something. They need a Franz Ferdinand moment in order to stoke the flames of Russophobia again. And I think that's what's going to happen. That's the easiest way to get a return on that investment. They tried to do it with, is it Fico? Robert Fico? People keep correcting me on how I pronounce Robert Fico. But they've tried to do it on numerous occasions. But it hasn't worked. So if they can do that, if they can create some kind of martyr, Donald Trump is creating this theatrical display in order to try to get some sort of plausible deniability. They want to distance themselves from Zelensky because he's still their patsy that they're going to use against Putin and Russia as a battering ram, but now they're trying to play pretend as though, oh yeah, we're really at odds with one another, right? They think the Russians are going to buy that. We're going to talk about that in a moment. The Russians ain't buying that, I assure you. Big pipeline was bombed that went to Kazakhstan, and this, of course, was done by the Ukrainians, by a French drone, in fact, used by the Ukrainians. So yeah, it's not too good. The Russian oil fleet, Shadow Fleet, is under attack by Ukrainian saboteurs. A couple explosions on this vessel transporting oil. We have the duplicitous Elon Musk hard at work doing nothing, rallying people up and buying businesses and claiming that you're the person who invented this stuff. B-52 Stratofortress for the second day. We have big bombers heading to the Middle East. Donald Trump made some very interesting comments on Air Force One, including related to investigating and auditing Fort Knox. And this was just, I think, an hour or so ago. The Chinese right now are scrambling to buy gold. I mean, it is a mad rush. They're lining up around the block, guys. Okay, lining up around. What are we buying here? We're still buying shit coins. Boris Johnson is saying, hey, don't worry. Don't worry. And I you know what? I got to trust Boris Johnson. I know this sounds crazy. Maybe it's the crazy hair, but you know, honestly, when the world's so crazy, you got to trust the guy who looks the craziest. And he's saying Trump is just trying to chalk you, and I actually agree. And I'm going to give you the reasons why. Robots are attacking people in China. Yes, you don't have to worry about the asteroid unless you live in one of these cities that has massive populations of 10 plus million people. By the equator, that's in 2032, so you got a little bit of time to move. We are on the ass end of the jet stream. Look at this. One of these things is not like the other. One just doesn't belong. Record cold temperatures. Everywhere else, it's pretty much above average. And yeah, so and what's gold doing? Gold, new record high. Well, right now, not intraday yet, but if it holds till the end of the day, another record high. I just talked to Lynette Zhang today, and she scared the shit out of me, which is no easy task. Going to be releasing that interview soon. Now, let's talk about the adult stuff. I'm sure all the kids have got it out of their system and they went to bed. All 2% of my viewers. You know, though, they keep you moving, right? They keep you motivated. Those are the zombies that, you know, they make sure you keep your cardio up. Okay. So, if you're the Russians right now, I want you to, all these people like, yeah, Trump and Putin are going to be best friends. They're going to bring Coca-Cola back. We're going to do all these economic deals. Or maybe we're even going to give money to the Russian military to destroy the Ukrainians. Okay, if you're the Russians right now, and I want you to pay close attention to Putin's body language. As somebody who has done a lot of videos with Putin now, I can tell you that this is a tense body language. This is not a guy who's like, happy, who's relieved, okay? This is very, very tense. We have tumultuous times ahead, and what the Russians are perceiving this as is, hey, you have basically used a proxy battering ram to try to destroy our country for 3 years so that you could balkanize it, you could break it up into little pieces, you could go and colonize it and steal all the resources, okay? Assassinate our president, okay? You've basically created a Russophobic hate all around the world. You've designated me as a war criminal. And now all of a sudden, hey, you know, sit down, have a drink. Hey, you know, would you like something to eat? You know, so they're thinking to themselves, wait a minute, what is this all about? This complete 180. Is it just the change in the administration? Is that really it? Trump is doing this out of spite? As revenge to the Democrats? I don't think so. Trump is not that myopic in his strategy. He is, and the word of the day is cajoling. He is trying to, using pomp and pageantry, try to create this illusion. And I would say that they're trying too hard. And this is why the Russians like, we ain't buying this. I mean, think about that. Somebody who wronged you, tried to kill you, tried to destroy and raid your home for years and years, suddenly wants to be your best friend, right while you're about to defeat them in the proxy country that you're fighting in? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. If you believe this, you're probably somewhere in here. And see, this is the thing. This is the crazy thing about these people. These people right now freaking out. They're like, Americans are banning us. Don't be mad at Zelensky. Right? And then these guys are like, yeah, see, Trump and Putin, they're going to be bros. They're both fucking idiots. Let me tell you what's going on. All right? Now listen what Putin says. He says, it's natural, in fact, completely normal. There's nothing unusual about having conversations. He simply started receiving objective information that changed his approach. Now, he's talking about why didn't Trump end the war in 24 hours, okay? So it will take some time. However, I'm not ready to give an answer just yet as to whether or not we're going to have these meetings, but we do want to have this meeting. And I would like to hold it. However, I repeat, it needs to be properly prepared in order to achieve results. And this is what I was saying yesterday, is that this is not something to be flippant about. You're talking about, and this is what I hope, I don't think Rubio and maybe even Trump truly appreciate. Maybe Trump does, having had that close brush-in with death. Maybe he does understand Putin's grievances here. And I'm not saying the Russians are 100% the good guys in this situation and that they need to be the ones to kowtow to at all. But understand that if you don't make a good first impression, you blow it. So long as there's the hope of talks, it's almost better to have the hopes of talks than to go into talks with no strategy. Because if you just go in there with no viable, with no game plan, okay, if he says this, we're going to say this, and have no protocol for what to say. Yeah, you want to be open-ended, but you want to have some sort of plan so you don't just get in there and you realize, oh, this is why hundreds of thousands of people are dead. There's actually a reason that goes above and beyond, it just being a nothing burger, and why can't we all be friends? So here's what I'm worried about. If I'm the Russians right now, I'm putting my military on the highest state of alert. On the highest state of alert. Because you think about what's going on right now. And they're pouring you drinks. They're buttering you up. After trying to kill you for 3 years. I'm not saying it was Trump. But Trump, I still don't think he's the head of the snake. It's the depth of deep state, if you want to call it that, is deeper than just the president, the CEO. It's deeper than that. Anyways, and Putin knows that. He's explicitly stated that. We don't really look at presidents as leaders of the country per se. We look at the overarching system of which they're a part, which extends beyond 4 years, and that's the essence of a deep state. So if I'm the Russians, I'm thinking, what are they getting ready to do? Are they just trying to get us to lower our defenses and become complacent so they could blindside us with an attack? Possibly a decapitation strike. Because remember, I've been warning people that all of this drone activity that we're seeing into Russia serves a dual purpose. They relay that information back to NATO and they map out Russia's air defenses. They're testing their defenses. And that puts Russia at a strategic disadvantage. Because, while it's true that Russia is testing the Patriot systems and all of the other air defense systems that have been provided to Ukraine, they haven't mapped out the terrain of NATO countries in terms of where they can fly drones to get the best results. I mean, they are doing that to a certain degree. There is surveillance drones in and around critical infrastructural facilities throughout Europe, but they're not actually, blowing things up like they are in Ukraine. And they're still doing that, by the way. And this is the thing. There's been, and I want you guys to remember this, no matter what Trump says, there has been zero actual change in policy. Now, you can just say, oh, they're saving that for when they go to the table. Okay, but don't you think, with all of the pomp and pageantry, you might extend a little olive branch. You might say, okay, if we're serious, we want to show you that we're serious, we're going to impose restrictions on Ukraine once again from using weapons inside the Kursk region, for example. We're going to do some gesture of goodwill in order to show you that we're actually serious and we're not just trying to deceive you. If I'm the Russians, my defenses are way up right now. And I am looking as tense as Putin is here. Okay? Now, this is one of those pivotal moments. It could go one way or it could go the other. We hope it turns into peace and the United States cuts its defense spending and all of this shit that they're promising, which they're never going to be able to do. And we'll talk about that in a second here. So here's Trump's promises. We're going to get rid of Zelensky because we don't like Zelensky. He's a dictator, right? As Trump called him here. He's a front man. And you got to understand one thing, and this is where the Russians are like, we got you. We got you, Trump. Why? Because who does Zelensky work for? Just like Trump says, he's a modestly successful comedian. Who propped up Zelensky in the first place? Who is protecting Zelensky right now? Well, it's the British Secret Service who's doing security detail for Zelensky. So is this why they're repatriating gold from London and Keir Starmer is talking about sending 30,000 troops? Because this really is somewhat of a war between the Brits and the Americans. The Brits won World War II, maybe, or well, I guess they didn't. The United States did, but remember it was a Mexican standoff in World War II. Germans, Russians, Americans. The goal of NATO, keep the Germans down, keep the Russians out, and the Americans in. For who? For whose benefit? The Brits? So is this really the dichotomy that we're seeing here? But he's addressing Zelensky like Zelensky's the guy in charge. And that's when Russia's like, we know this guy isn't in charge, right? So Trump putting him on blast. Now, they might just think, okay, Trump is doing this because they want regime change and they gotta test the public opinion about this. And I can tell you that despite all of the negative sentiment towards Zelensky, he still has a lot of support. This 4% figure is not entirely true. And the NAFO will say it's Russian propaganda, and I can't stand a lot of NAFO accounts. I think they're annoying as all hell. But I still don't think that him telling lies like this helps the cause. Because the $350 billion figure, we know it was less than that. It was like $200 billion, I believe. This is the graph. Now, he could be talking about auxiliary costs that get factored in there. Maybe the cost of like the missile that they created, that they gave Ukraine, now costs 3 times to create, and that's what they're factoring into the price point. I don't know. Maybe it is 350 billion. Either way, I think what they're doing here is creating plausible deniability. So if and when they need Zelensky to up the ante, they can say, oh, well, it wasn't us. It was this rogue patsy that we put into place that we're trying to get rid of, but we just can't, right? So that's one thing, that he's promising elections. How they're going to do that, Zelensky's saying we can't have elections, we don't have the logistics capable, even though we got people doing spin classes on high-rise buildings and doing nightclubs in Kiev every other night. We can't put together an election. Now, people are comparing this to the United States falsely and saying, well, the U.S. had elections in World War II, therefore Ukraine should be able to have elections now. And I mean, these things aren't even comparable. You're separated by oceans. Pearl Harbor is not one of the biggest militaries in the world beating down your door and taking 20% of your country. I mean, these aren't even comparable situations, okay? And then people say, well, there was an election during the Civil War. And it's like, yeah, you have a massive landmass and people far from the front are still able to vote. And arguably, you know, that was just for political purposes to have the vote. So, you know, you can't really compare those things. But yeah, do I think that they could have an election? Do I think they should have an election? Do I think that Zelensky is an authoritarian dictator by not just factually? Yeah. I mean, you get locked up if you take any video. He's banned the media. He's banned political parties. He's pulling guys off the streets in the thousands to go and fight and die against their will in a war that many of them don't agree with. Yeah, that's about as dictatorial as it gets. It's martial law, full-blown martial law. And the late Gonzalo Lira is being tweeted about today once again. And I'm happy to say that, you know, I was following Gonzalo long before Elon Musk ever knew about him and was using him for clickbait to promote whatever sort of agenda they're trying to promote right now. But yes, Gonzalo Lira did die in custody. Mind you, you know, the Ukrainians will say, well, you know, one of our guys died in, or one of the Russian, what was his name? The guy who died in custody in one of the gulag up there in Russia, the politician, I can't remember what his name is, Navalny. So, that works both ways. But okay, so I'm getting off track here. Here's the Trump promises to Putin. Now, just think about this. They're trying to kill Putin. They're trying to balkanize the country. They're destroying oil refineries. They're blowing things up. They're sending drones into the Kremlin. Okay? Long-range missile strikes. And all of a sudden, Trump says, hey, Zelensky guy, he's gone. We're going to remove troops from all the intermarium countries. Baltic states, they're out of there. Finland, we're out of there. Poland, we're out of there. Even though the Polish president today, Duda, said that he has received U.S. assurances that Washington will not reduce its troop presence in Poland and elsewhere along NATO's eastern flank. So that was bullshit. But Trump will say it anyways. U.S. is actually considering leaving NATO. Yes, the global hegemon, the preeminent power in the world, is getting ready to concede defeat, even though its entire monetary system depends on it being the global superpower. Yeah, that's what they want you to believe. We're going to have trilateral military talks with the Chinese and the Russians. Yeah, we're going to actually curtail our nuclear proliferation, even though we've been updating our nuclear doctrine for the last few years, and the same generals who were in charge then and wrote those revisions to the nuclear doctrine are still in today, those positions, okay? But yeah, we're going to, because the Chinese are going to lower their nuclear proliferation ambitions, even though they're, like 1/6 of the way, at least on paper, towards reaching parity with the United States and Russia. It's not going to happen. Now Pete Hegseth is saying that we're going to cut military spending by 8% a year until 2030, which is really, when you factor in inflation, that's more like 60% probably by then at the current rate of inflation. So he's saying we're going to cut our military by 60%, even though he can't actually say that. That's something that requires bicameral approval. It requires Congress and the House, and that's never going to get bipartisan support. I mean, let's face it. They might be able to find some bloat in there with Doge, but we don't even know if that is a legally legitimate institution of itself that's going to have any power to enforce half the shit it talks about. So forget about it. Oh yeah, we're going to have cooperation in the Arctic. We want to cooperate with you. You've spent 20 years while the Arctic sea ice has been melting, and half of our cabinet has denied that that's been happening, even though it's just a scientific fact that it's melting, which is why they're building icebreakers up there, nuclear icebreakers, massive machines, investing billions of dollars in the Arctic to build a northern Arctic corridor. And, we just decided last minute, I think last year they were scrambling. They're like, okay, we got to annex this part of the Arctic Ocean outside of Alaska. And now we want to be friends and we want to do joint projects up there. Yes, we realize both of us are vying for energy dominance in the world, but we want to be friends now and we can cooperate up there. That's why we built that giant space base. And that's why, we're talking about militarizing Greenland and how Greenland needs our protection from the Chinese, even though they only have a small sliver of Arctic space that they can utilize. So Trump is talking about militarizing Greenland for the purpose of protecting against, or perhaps targeting, Russia. And they're trying to convince the Russians that they want to work with them. Yeah, think about it. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. We all want to be believers. But even me, I want to be a believer. Like, I'm thinking, hey, we could use an economic boom. Maybe this could be a new era of global human prosperity. But let's get real. The Russians aren't playing this game. We're going to remove sanctions. We're going to bring all the brands back. Yeah, you're not going to have any sanctions anymore. And you're going to get Coca-Cola and Gucci and Louis Vuitton and all that stuff, right? We're even going to let the media do its thing once again. We're going to, get rid of these bans on the media. I mean, that would be one of the easy things they could probably do immediately, was get YouTube or some of these companies to remove the bans on, things like RT. But, they haven't done that yet. Not one olive branch has been extended yet. People say, well, they're saving it. And maybe that's the prudent thing to do. But I'm just saying, there's what they're saying and what they're doing. And all they've done so far is they've rushed into these talks. And I say rushed in relative terms because, yes, it wasn't 24 hours because the president's a busy guy. I couldn't even imagine how busy that guy is. Would never want to do that job myself, at least not at this stage of my life. Maybe when you get older, it's like, hey, I'm on borrowed time anyways, I might as well. But I can understand why they've taken so long, but it still is rather haphazard, it seems. Especially with Rubio and that whole meeting between Rubio and Lavrov, you could just tell that, this is a guy who's a hardline neo-hawk, anti-Russian to the core, who suddenly is trying to be friends for some reason. Please don't destroy our proxy. What has Donald Trump and friends done? Well, they've continued to send arms to Ukraine. You remember when they made that big display, oh, we're stopping aid to Ukraine, no more weapons for Ukraine. And then 2 days later, okay, we're just going to turn this back on, but we're not going to make a big spectacle of it like we did the first time because we don't want you to know that we want you to think that we actually did something and we're sticking it to Zelensky. Nope. They are making deals. They're trying to make deals with Ukraine. Think about this. They're trying to make a deal with Ukraine, which is one of the most exploitative deals I think I've ever heard of, where they basically get half their shit. This is like Negan with a baseball bat coming up to Zelensky. And you might not like Zelensky, but how could you ever sell your country out like that? They want $500 billion in natural resources to make up for the $150-300 billion. Now, in the Ukrainians' mind, they're like, hey, we bled for you guys. That is what we paid. We were able to attrit and slow down the Russians. We were able to set them back, even though it totally backfired, as it always does. Because when you impose sanctions on a country, and with given enough time, they're going to become more self-reliant, and they're not going to be as affected by disruptions in the global supply chain. So they build resilience, which is what Russia has done. And of course, Russia has been able to continue and maintain ties with some pretty heavy hitters like China and India and BRICS. So, they're going to continue to enable these long-range strikes into the territory. Trump has not removed any restrictions on long-range strikes, long-range. The probing operations that continue with the drones, all of that's continuing. They're still mobilizing Europe right now to spend more money. Oh yeah, I didn't finish my point about the $500 billion. So the whole point of that deal was that they would continue arming Ukraine and give them security guarantees, I presume. Now, he didn't sign that deal, and Scott Bessent now is getting in on it, and Trump is trying to get Bessent to co-sign how Zelensky has a bad attitude because he didn't sign away his country, which I totally understand. You might not like Zelensky, but you'd be dumb to sign that deal. You would be dumb to sign that deal. Anybody would be, and nobody would have, forgiven Zelensky for selling his country out like that. So I can understand why, but now they're trying to say, oh yeah, Scott Bessent was saying that it's the Secretary Treasury, he's saying that, he was late for a meeting and, he was rude and all this stuff. But understand, so on the one hand, you're saying, yeah, we want to get rid of this clown and we want to, make peace, but we're also secretly working on a deal in which they're going to continue to arm them to the teeth in exchange for what Lindsey Graham has been fantasizing about, which is basically coveting all the resources in the country, right? He can't shut up about it every single time he's on camera. We got to get these resources. These Ukrainians are dying for us. And I do agree that the Ukrainian blood that has been shed, if you believe this whole divide, if you believe this dialectic that's happening between, the Slavs and the West and the East, then they should get something for dying on behalf of Europe. If Europe genuinely thinks that this is, and people will say, well, the United States isn't Europe, but, our interests are still, inextricably linked together for the most part, that has a price, okay? They've bled for your team. So that's worth something. Unless you don't think they're on your team, which maybe they don't, but again, they're not doing anything. So Trump is continuing with the exact same policies of Joe Biden. Military exercises abound all over the map. Minuteman missile tests, which were pre-scheduled, but even postponing it might be an olive branch of sorts. The fact that they're continuing to do it, and you still actually have some Russian bombing exercises near the Alaskan coast underway. And they're also talking about mobilizing Europe to spend more money. And this is the most critical one, because you have Pete Hegseth saying, hey, you guys have a threat coming. Not saying what the threat is, kind of like Greenland. We're not going to say what it is, but you know what it is. It's Russia. We need you to spend a shitload of money, trillions of dollars, on our weapons that we're going to sell you so we can get our industry back. That's how we're going to do it, going into a war economy. And you're going to use those weapons against the Russians. Now, if you're the Russians and you're hearing this, you're thinking, wait a minute, that's probably not good for us. That's not what we envision. We don't want to just, see the US pull out and then that gets replaced by a European army that's 3 times as large. I mean, that's not a good deal for the Russians, even though it buys them time. And really, that's all this is. That's all this is right now, is buying time. Or they're buttering the Russians up for a decapitation strike. Now, that's the extreme, okay? So there's extremes. The extreme view is that they are trying to get the Russians to lower their defenses, and they're just going to go all out. They got the F-35s lined up. They got the shit going on in the Arctic. They could do it with bombers. They have a plan for this. I'm not saying it's going to be, there's going to be nukes that hit North America in this scenario, which I give like a 5% chance of happening. But if there was ever time to do it, it would be when Russia was at its weakest point, which is what it is now, not necessarily in the sense of its military experience that it's gained and its industrial capacity. Yes, that is ramping up, but I think their spend rate is still higher than their production rate. And who knows how long they can sustain that. They still have, they're still very capable. But, at some point, things could start to dwindle. So if there ever was a time to attempt it, it would be now. And you first set them up for the double cross. Now, on the other extreme of that, it would be to get Zelensky, who you've now alienated, at least in the smoke and mirrors sort of way for the public. They make you think that Trump and Zelensky are at odds, so they are no longer collaborating, even though they are, because as I've told you, Trump continues to enable Zelensky. No matter what Trump says about Zelensky, he continues to enable that government. And it's not Zelensky. Zelensky is a comedian who prances around in tights, and they put him up there because maybe they thought he was likable for the cameras or whatever. And he could talk the talk and shake people's hand and do all that good stuff, right? And he could wear a gray t-shirt. When you see Zelensky in a suit again, that's when you'll know that the war is over. But who they're talking to is they're talking past Zelensky, obviously. The people who he surrounds himself with, Yermak, his defense minister, these guys who surround him are really shady, really thug-looking. I have a feeling that these characters are the ones who are keeping Zelensky in line, and I've noticed in several press conferences that they almost appear to be directing him as to what to do in certain situations, as if they're his boss. Anyways, and there's the British MI6 who are overseeing all of this, and at the same time, it's the United States arguing with their puppet, right? So now the United States can't just depose of him, because then he would be a martyr and that would backfire immensely. Because despite all of the shit that he's done, there's still lots of crazy people out there who are willing to do crazy shit on his behalf. I mean, think about the guy who took a shot, or was about to take a shot at Trump at the golf course. How he was all half-cocked and motivated on all that nonsense. And think about the guy who tried to take out Robert Fico, okay? The Slovakian prime minister, president, whatever he is, okay, leader. And, there's just a lot of these half-cocked people running around. He's ideologically driven, and that doesn't even include like the Azov types. That's just like the blue hair types. That's not like the actual legit 100% bona fide neo-Nazis, okay, which they exist. They 100% exist. They were doing documentaries on it before this all started. You can say that now. You couldn't say that 3 years ago because you would be canceled. And maybe this whole vocalization against Ukraine is actually going to backfire, and we're going to see some Franz Ferdinand moment, and then they're going to turn the guns on us again. I don't know. But, okay, so that's the situation. And remember the whole Little Kim ordeal, right, where Trump was like, Rocket Man, we're going to blow up your country, we're going to wipe you off the map, all this stuff. And then, you know, a month later, they're shaking hands, right? And it's this big photo op. That's why what Boris Johnson is saying, and you really got to look, like, Trump keeps saying he's going to do all this stuff. We're going to impose tariffs and blah, 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 blah. And nothing has really happened. I mean, he has imposed some tariffs, but not the sweeping tariffs. You know, so all of this tough talk and bluster with Trudeau and this bloviating against anybody who is at odds with him politically, it usually, you know, I hate to say it because this is the guy who arguably is the architect of this war in its initial phases, but I think he's right. I think Trump is just trying to rattle people's cages because he wants Europe to pick up the slack and to start militarizing. And the smart people on that side of the argument are saying, yeah, you're right. We should mobilize. We should militarize. So, I mean, this is not about we're trying to make friends with. The Russians are never going to trust. Nobody with half a brain and any self-respecting, you know, bone in their body would ever trust the West, much less the United States, ever again. And that's not a slight against the United States people. That is just the military-industrial complex that unfortunately speaks on your behalf, okay? And I'm right in there with you because we're the ones fighting with you in Afghanistan and all these misadventures. So, yeah. That's what's going on. So, the Brits are threatening, I should say, probably not threatening, but 30,000 troops into the fight to act as peacekeepers, okay? This, of course, is NATO. That's what this is. And this is where I can understand the trepidation of Vladimir Putin when he's making these comments, because, I mean, these things have huge implications. And because the Russians are so jurisprudent and they really do cross their T's and dot their I's when it comes to the legalities of this stuff. So if they make an agreement, they're actually going to honor it. They're not just going to use it as I mean, they're going to rearm. They're not stupid. But that is not the primary purpose. I legit believe that, and I mean, Putin's been in the game for how long now, and he's been able to maintain power. This guy isn't stupid. He's getting ready for a chess game. Okay, this is not just checkers. And if you approach this like checkers, which I don't think Trump is, he wouldn't be talking about Greenland and Space Force. You know, this guy does think moves ahead. Trump is smarter than I think people think he's smart in a business sense, but I think he has perhaps in certain issues, because in the president, you know, you got so many things that you're trying to do that you can't have foresight in every possible issue because you just don't have enough information. But I think when it comes to focusing on an issue, I do believe that he does have some strategy. I'm not saying he's a chess master, and he's no Vladimir Putin when it comes to this stuff. But I do think that he at least sees the global chessboard. Like, he at least understands the China trade thing. He at least understands that, you know, the Chinese are the most formidable peer adversary that we have. He understands the Arctic thing. He understands, you know, the importance of Greenland and, you know, the importance of Europe preparing itself for potential future wars. So he's not completely myopic in his thinking. So Ukraine, all the while, has been attacking Russian Shadow Fleet ships, conducting drone strikes, while the Russians have been heavily bombarding Kiev while Colonel Kellogg is in Kiev bombing the shit out of Kiev. And that's a message too. And that is why no matter what you see, all the political niceties being exchanged, just watch what happens. Judge them by their deeds, or whatever that biblical proverb is. Judge them by their deeds. Is that what it is? I don't know. Somebody write in the comment section. So yeah, they are bombing and sabotaging research facilities. And remember, these guys are half-cocked. I mean, you remember that Crocus terrorist attack thing in Moscow with the gunmen? You're going to see that if the U.S. relents in its support of the Zelensky administration, you're going to see people start losing their shit, okay? If you want to see blue hairs go crazy, depose Zelensky, and that's what's going to happen. So anyways, this guy's getting closer. Britain is trying to take a leadership role, and then what ends up happening is France not wanting to be left out and not wanting to have Britain take the lead. They're going to step up and be like, you know, they're going to up the ante, and they'll be like, yeah, we'll do it too. Even Olaf Scholz is vocally criticizing Donald Trump. Olaf Scholz, Germany, of course, would be they're definitely the most economically powerful in Europe. They're the powerhouse of Europe, period. If they decided to militarize and focused on that, then, you know, we all know what's going to happen, right? Its history is going to repeat. So, you know, that's what's going to happen. And let's see what else we got here. So this is a Minuteman missile test, standard fare. You know, this happens every, I don't know, 6 months or so. But they've been doing this for a while now, and eventually they're going to run out. So they've updated their nuclear doctrine so that they can attack countries that don't have nukes with impunity. Foreign Intelligence Service in Russia is saying Ukraine may arrange terrorist attacks in Europe to disrupt negotiations. What's that going to look like? How does that serve Ukraine? I don't know. It doesn't really serve Ukraine. So maybe that's the Russians setting up a false flag. I've been, you know, taking the piss out of the Ukrainians, but, you know, the Russians, they do their false flag things too. I mean, there was that dam incident that I still think the jury's out on who blew up the dam. You know, there was a few incidents throughout the conflict where I'm like, you know, that one has Rasputin written all over it. And what else do we got here? So we talked about the pipeline. We talked about the French drone that was identified in the Kazakh region that destroyed the pumping station, I believe. So that put oil out of commission. I believe this is an accurate image of the ship, the most recent Russian oil vessel that was sabotaged. And I can't remember if this one took place around Italy, I think. I may be mistaken. I might be mixing things up. It's just so much shit's been happening. So this is Elon Musk in March 4th of 2022. Hold strong, Ukraine. This is just a sign of... I mean, I guess these things are not mutually exclusive positions because you still can be pro-Ukraine and against the leadership of Ukraine. Did Zelensky kill Gonzalo Lira? Not directly. One could make an argument that he was illegitimately directed or arrested. Directed. Yeah, he was illegitimately arrested. They're on bullshit charges. Perhaps he was mistreated. He claims he was mistreated in jail. He was tortured. You just kind of take him as his word, I guess, considering the circumstances. But that said, I mean, I was telling Gonzalo all along, like, why are you and in fact, he was the basis for a video I did when the war started on normalcy bias. I referenced him in particular where he's talking about, see, there's no war. The Russians aren't going to invade. He distinctly made a video about that. And I'm like, Gonzalo, there's a war coming. I mean, it's happening. It's going to happen. It's going to happen any day now. Because at the time, I was following, what's his name? Bentley. What the hell was his name again? He died recently. A Russian Bentley. He was a guy, but that's how I knew the war was going to start because that's how I made that video that blew up when I said the war was going to start in 24 hours. because he said it was going to start in 24 hours, and you'd have to be off the beaten path to find that information. And anyways, because he was right on the front line, and as well as what's the other guy's name? The reporter. I'm forgetting names here. Time has flied, but he's a guy, Patrick Thomas, is it? Who does frontline reporting in Ukraine, and this guy should win like whatever the prize is for, Pulitzer Prize or whatever, one of these international prizes for journalism, because, man, some of the footage that guy has gotten. So I knew that this was going to go down, and I used Gonzalo as an example of what not to do when you're in a war zone. It's almost as if the guy had a death wish. And it's unfortunate what happened. I suppose he's somewhat been martyred, and his spirit lives on in these posts of people who are very influential and never heard of the guy when he lived. The author of the Coach Red Pill channel, when it was out on YouTube before it got banned. I mean, what do you expect, right? When you're making videos that say after 25 she's used up or whatever. That kind of stuff. That 2017, 2018 kind of stuff. So I don't know much about this, but we got B-52 Stratofortress heading frequently to the Middle East. Is it Iran? Is it, Lebanon? Who knows? Here's what Trump had to say about some stuff on Air Force One. How much time we got left here? Oh, shit, I got 19%. All right. God, it's late. At least I'm not freezing my
Fort Knox. We're going to go into Fort Knox to make sure the gold is there. We're going to go into Fort Knox to make sure the gold is there.
Are they going
to that? We're going to go into Fort Knox. Do you know about that?
Okay. I'm still waiting for him to release the information on the New Jersey drones that goes beyond a 10-second soundbite by his press secretary, who said these drones were authorized by the government to be there. You remember that? We're still waiting for that. Yeah, we're going to figure out in the first day. Haven't heard anything yet. So that's why I don't believe this shit. I mean, okay, even if they do audit Fort Knox, like, to me, that's almost like a prime time thing. There's so many ways that they could make, because nobody's allowed in there. So what does an audit really mean? Are they going to pull them aside and say, okay, we're going to make it look, we're going to put on this. You're never going to be able, people are always going to be in disbelief that what you're seeing is real. Is it just lead wrapped in gold leaf or something? Who knows? But I'm excited. I mean, it's exciting to know these things, but is it really going to change anything? You see, the reason why I don't give a shit what politicians say, because I don't base anything in my reality on what they do. I'm going to succeed either way. So that's why I'm not, I don't have a dog in the fight, with the exception of Trudeau, who I don't want to take my guns.
Are they going to eliminate more national security positions, civilians there?
We'll see what happens. But one of the things we do want to look, we hope everything's fine with Fort Knox, but we're going to go to Fort Knox, the fabled Fort Knox, to make sure the gold is there.
Where would the gold have gone?
If the gold isn't there, we're going to be very upset.
If the gold isn't there, then, I mean, come on, that's JFK level shit, right? If the gold ain't there and they're just like, oh, where's the gold? For starters, I don't know what sort of effect that would have. And is this why they're repatriating the gold? Because some people are thinking because they're doing that. Other people are saying it's Ray Dalio. It's billionaires who are actually, starting to hedge against what's coming in the crash that's inevitable. This guy has a very egg-shaped head. I just noticed. I'm not dissing him. It's just an observation, okay? Okay, now, did I go over all my points here? Did I go over all my points? I'm talking so damn much. Don't even know what I said yet. All right. Now, this is the Chinese. Some of them anyways. They are storming the shopping malls, okay? They are trying to get, clamoring for some gold, running because it is rare. It's hard to find. There's many markets right now where they've actually taken silver off the market or it's sold out. So it's actually selling at a higher price in China. So I'm sure they're doing arbitrage as well. And that could be, now that I think about it, maybe they're repatriating from London because they're trying to send it to China to sell to the Chinese. I don't know. But the Chinese are also one of the biggest producers of gold. So people are buying jewelry, which I would actually recommend, especially for Mad Max barter. Because if you're trying to barter with somebody and you have precious metals, then you got to be very careful, right? If you're pulling out stacks of like bullion and, you know, nice like Canadian mint silver bars, people are going to think you have more of that stuff. So, you know, if you have this treasured necklace that your grandpa gave to you, or at least that's the story you make up, then jewelry actually makes sense for barter. And just getting, like, if you can get cheap gold chains, or not so much silver, because, you know, silver, the value of it isn't nearly as inflated as gold is. And gold's not inflated, it's just the gold-silver ratio is not on par where it should be historically right now. Silver, you know, I mean, you could get silverware, but then you're paying a massive premium on it. You could get, you know, just silver coins are probably fine. But if you want to get gold, which has more value density, then you might want to look at jewelry, but you're going to pay a premium. So if you can get something like a ring, and you can get a lot of that, and there's not a huge markup, like it's just a straight wedding band style thing or something, then, you know, that's something to consider. The only problem with that is that the person who is trading, you're trading for, has to be able to prove that it's gold. And the great thing about bullion or your numismatics is that they're harder to counterfeit. Now, this happened in China on the lighter side as we wind down here. And apparently a robot went rogue. Oh, what's going on here? So it didn't actually, okay, yeah, maybe I was overselling that, but watch what happens. So the robot goes up to the barrier and it doesn't know what to do, and it like headbutts somebody. So that was just an error, but it legit like snapped its head. That was a full-on, that was an MMA, a illegal MMA move right there. So these look like Unitree bots. You can buy these. You can get the cheap ones for I think 20 grand, or you can get the more experimental programmable ones for about 100 grand. I think within a few years they're going to be way cheaper than that. Impact risk corridor of asteroid 2024, flight path 2032, Dhaka, Mumbai, Khartoum, Lagos, Bogota. I know Lagos and Mumbai are massive cities, and we're talking about an 8 megaton blast if this thing hits. And for all we know, it's going to be worse. So hopefully Bruce Willis is ready to take a flight on one of Elon's rockets to save the world, or else we could very well be fucked. Because you never know, you know, if this did wipe out a big city, I mean, the odds of it are pretty low when you think about it. In terms of where it could hit on the equator, it probably has like so it has a 3% chance of hitting the Earth, and maybe if it does hit the Earth, it probably has like a 1% chance of hitting a place where people are. But if it does, then that could create major disruptions in the global supply chains, and who knows what sort of residual effects it could have. So crazy, crazy times. Again, this cold front is about to leave. This is a great website, guys. Let's just look at our forecast. So we got right now, so for the next, it gives you 3 days out. It gives you 4 to 6 days out. So in 4 to 6 days, we're not even going to have to, oh, my freaking head's in the way. Sorry about that. So yeah, so it's going to be right back to normal, which is above average temperatures. And you can see the Arctic ice is melting. Now this is a temperature anomaly. So this isn't actually how warm it is. This isn't a heat map, but this website also gives you that information as well. So you can look at the temperature, you can look at the wind speed, precipitation. So this is the actual temperatures that we're looking at later on this week. We get a little bit greener up here, and then Texas goes back to red. And all these places that are like white, that's like scorching hot, 110 degrees, 120 degrees. So hopefully the worst of winter is behind us, but you know, I think it'll give us one last blast at least. And what else do we have to talk about here? Gold, still record highs. Anyways, looks like we got cut off there, but I'd seen the 2063. So the rich people are buying gold. The rich people are the biggest preppers out there. People are talking about, oh, preppers are paranoid. The government has a place called Fort Knox where they hoard the most gold in the world. They spend the most money on defense. They have strategic oil reserves, strategic medical reserves. The government are the biggest preppers. They dig the deepest bunkers. And we're paranoid? What the f... Anyways, I gotta get that on a t-shirt. Let's think of some ideas for a t-shirt. Guys, if you want to support the channel, CanadianPreparedness.com. We release some blue strip videos here and there. I released one earlier today on a, what do you call it? It was a little thermal imager, little tiny thermal imager. One of the coolest things I've seen, and you know, one of the first videos I did 10 years ago was a Seek thermal imager, which is something you attach to your phone, but it was way bigger. The resolution was shit, the app was shit, and it was like 2 or 3 times expensive if you factor in inflation. So this is a cool little device. So go check that video out. It was the one that I released just before this one, and it's something I keep on my EDC because it's so small. We don't sell these. I don't have any affiliation with the company. I wish I did because it's a cool little device, and I have no problem carrying this. Look how small that is. That's a thermal imager with high resolution. I know thermal imagers. I have several top tier ones. But this is freaking awesome. This is like my go-to. This little $250 Canadian thermal imager that has almost as good resolution as my higher-end thermal imagers, even though it's using AI to interpolate, to basically fill in the blanks of the pixel, so it's not 100%. But for anything around the house or for just seeing if there's a bad guy in the bushes at night, this works perfectly fine. So go watch the video I did recently. If you guys want more content like that, you got to support the content by at least watching the videos, okay? Or if you don't want to, then fine. If you just want me to rant and rave about the end of the world, then, you know, I like to do that too. So anyway, see you later. Blah, blah, blah.